Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. and the United States, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for the 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. And looking at that, one of the critical resources that we need to be concerned about, to be able to conserve, and also how we're going to expand the sources of it, of course, is water. We can live without oil for a while, live without food, but no one can live without water. And so this is really a major concern for many development agencies, the World Bank, United Nations, International Monetary Fund, Rotary International, and many other international bodies that are working very actively on a day-to-day basis about how we bring better water and more water into communities around the globe. We have a gentleman sitting right beside me. His name is Harold Albert Vaughan. He is the project partner for Maharashtra, India. It's called Water First, Water Sanitation and Hygiene, WASH, a Rotary Action Group project, and he's sitting right beside me. Hal, welcome.
My pleasure.
Glad to have you here. And looking at India, we'll talk about that in a minute, but what is Rotary International?
I think first, what is Rotary? I see by our respective pins, we're both Rotarians.
Exactly.
We're members of a club. We're two of over 1 million Rotarians in 34,000 some odd clubs around the world. The Rotary clubs in any country where the government won't interfere in what they do. Now, Rotary International is sort of the organization that pulls all these together and focuses them and helps them, do good deeds around the world.
Well, I tell you, it's fantastic to have 34,000 clubs in about 186 countries, as I understand it. And at the same time, we have, Rotarians in just about every community in these countries known to humankind. So why are they looking at water as one of the focal points of Rotary International?
Well, Rotary focuses on a number of things. I mean, they've narrowed it down. One of those things is water. And of course, as you pointed out, water is essential to life. And we're not taking very good care of it. And so we have to do something. And so water becomes one of the important focuses upon which Rotary will spend its resources.
Well, looking at this next slide, this shows us the areas where it's really critical as far as water is concerned. Some areas where it's less an issue, but really how I think what Rotary is finding out in the research from the UN, World Bank, and others is that water is challenged everywhere on the face of the planet because we're going to soon have 9 billion people on this planet.
As has been said, there's only so much water on the earth. There isn't going to be any more. We have to use very carefully what's here. And as I said a minute ago, we don't always do that. We're contaminating water, we're misusing it. There are parts of the world where there's too much water. We're more concerned about those areas right now where there's too little, because too little water has a terrible impact, not only on people's health, but on their livelihood and their ability to take care of themselves, their children, and their own sort of issues.
Well, looking at your WASH community, again, this is the water sanitation, hygiene, health, as I call it. Why did you select such a rural area in Western India to be one of your test projects?
Well, in a certain sense, they selected us. Now, not entirely, but some people from there came to us with the need for some help with their water issues. Now, the WASROC, which is the the Water and Sanitation Rotary Action Group, focused on this area because of a particular severe need. They did an important study and made some recommendations for things that need to be done. Now, it's a moment for me to make clear that we're the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. We're working in cooperation with the Rotary Club of Tacoma, Washington. So it's a joint project. And it's because it's a very serious issue in that part of the world.
Well, also, too, there's a like Rotary Club or clubs and also a Rotary District within India that we have to collaborate with in order to do these projects as well.
As it happens, as we'll say in a minute, there are 9 to 11 villages involved, all of them within a single Rotary District in India, which is a matter of convenience, of course.
Yeah, well, that's really good, too, that when you have collaborators on the ground in this area, we'll be talking about this, but water is such a huge issue. Without collaboration among all the parties as well as the local communities, nothing is good is really going to come out of this.
Yeah. People who live in areas where there's a severe shortage of water, water is contaminated, there's not enough water, they suffer.
Yeah, and looking at these pictures here, many villages just like this around the globe, about 1.5 billion people do not have access to adequate water on a day-to-day basis. But what is really more upsetting about all this, Hal, is that almost half the world's population, 3.5 billion, don't have access to adequate sanitation.
Yeah. And the consequences of that keep going on and on and on, and increased levels of disease, malnutrition, early death, child mortality, you name it, and if it's bad, that happens.
Yeah, and it's going on in villages just like this all around the globe. And this gives you an opportunity. You and I both have traveled extensively abroad and seen many cases like this where this is the water for everything. And we can stretch our mind around what everything is as far as how this water is being used. But looking at it, why did you choose this, Roy? I know you said they chose you, but is there anything compelling in this particular area that would be lessons learned or best practices that we can share with other Rotary clubs and other international bodies as well?
Well, this area presents some sort of a classic case of issues. They're poor, I mean really poor. You know, the U.S. standard, I think, for poverty level is $1.50 a day. Half the people in this area live below the poverty level, some of them living on half a dollar a day. Now, of the 9 villages in the original study, only one of those villages has drinking water in their homes. In the rest of the villages, water is carried by women, sometimes over a considerable distance, and obviously at considerable disadvantage home. They bring it from wells when there's water in the wells, which is not always the case, from the river and its tributaries. And there's not enough of it. I mean, we're talking about, first of all, safe water. Now there is other water. It's not safe. It's been contaminated. It's contaminated partly by animal use. So we need, they need to have water for safe drinking water, for sanitation purposes, for irrigation of crops. They depend on agriculture for their livelihood and for their cattle. So there's much to be done. Now there's a lack of toilet blocks. Some of the new homes have toilet blocks, but they don't use them because they don't have enough water on a consistent basis to maintain them. Now the project is going to try to address a number of those issues. And of course, it has to be tested out to see what works. But it's going to be a case study of what needs to be done in an impoverished area. Yeah,
I was just recently in Mexico, and we were looking at the sanitation blocks as you're talking about. And there, it's a totally dry system. So there's no water that goes into it in any way. And it's very ingenious where they use the local soil, so then everything is digested by the anaerobic bacteria, and et cetera, and it goes back in the land after 3 to 4 months once it's sterilized to help create the crop. So that's very, very important. But how does Future Visions, this is a kind of a new thrust, a new way Rotary is reaching out to communities like these in India and around the globe and allowing clubs to collaborate and work together. This Future Visions, how do you see that working and to help in the Maharashtra area and other places in India and other countries? Well, the Future Vision, which is really in part a system for providing financial support for well thought through projects, and it's a system, and the system compels us, fortunately, to have partners in the host country. There has to be a host club. That ensures that we are aware of what the needs are.
We're aware of cultural differences. We know what to do, what not to do, and we have people we can depend on because the only axe they have to grind is their own needs. Now, Rotary will fund projects on a matching basis. The clubs involved have to raise money to be matched, and that's a challenge. This is a pretty big big
really
project.
is. And the thing about that, too, both of us are wearing our Paul Harris Fellow pins, and I know that there's a amount of funds, actually a great amount of funds that goes into the Paul Harris Foundation to go out to these organizations. So how does the Paul Harris Foundation, the fund, actually help with future visions and to assess the local clubs both in North America, because the Canadians and Mexicans are very much involved in this, as well as the Rotary clubs abroad?
Well, in the case of our club, and we have a Rotary district, the contributions that members of our club make to Paul Harris come back to us 2 or 3 years later, and that money is then used on a matching basis so that the district provides matching funds. Then Rotary International has its own foundation, and they match district money 100%, club money 50%. So if we can raise the money, Rotary is there to help significantly along the way.
And I was leading there with that question there because many of these local villages, people say, well, why don't they do this themselves? Why don't they do this themselves? And how is Rotary really helping to be a platform to allow them to address this most pressing issue of the lack of water?
Well, I think if I were to ask people, why don't you do this ourselves, they'd say, we wish we could. You know, as I pointed out at the beginning, these are really poor villages, but they recognize that they need safe water, and they need more water for other needs. So they're very supportive. They need something that we can offer, which is expertise, in the case of WASROC, technical capability, and some funding to carry out projects that they couldn't possibly do on their own.
And allow them to work and be involved. And I believe these are meetings about this various project in the local community. So, you know, the whole thing is that they really are truly involved in what's going on. So what would be, we only have about 30 seconds. What would you like to share with our audiences here and abroad? Well,
in 30 seconds, I can't go through what the project would do, but it would address these whole series of issues. Provide more water, save water, harvest water during dry seasons, and we're pretty confident that we can, through the project, meet the needs of these communities at their multiple levels.
Well, thank you for being with us, dear viewer. Thank you for looking in on water as we create the Emerald Planet. Good job.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime,
13 minutes.
often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet in Washington, D.C., and we're looking for those 1,000 best practices for the technologies, the products, and the services, and specifically focused on the issue of water as we look towards 2050 and have 2 billion new people on the planet. So when we're already stretched at over 7 billion, how are we going to accommodate 2 billion new people and provide a quality of life that's actually going to exceed just the minimum and the basic essence of existence? We have 4 people going to be coming on and talking about how high schools are getting involved in this whole process and looking seriously in a number of different countries around the globe. We have with us Mary Rogers, who is a Services Learning Facilitator, Noelle Sterling, Vice President, Abby Starker, who is the Secretary, and Joe Mernick, who is a member, Board of Directors for H2O for Life, and they're in the Abington School District, and I believe in Abington High School up in Pennsylvania. And then right beside me is Harold Vaughn, who is the project partner for the Maharashtra India Water First Water Sanitation and Hygiene Rotary Action Group project. Hal's with me as a backup in case we lose Skype with our folks up in Pennsylvania. And hello, team in Pennsylvania. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Welcome. And Mary, I've been very impressed when you were on Capitol Hill on World Water Day and brought your team down. You really have an enthusiastic, very intelligent group.
Thank you.
So looking at how did you learn about H2O for Life, and tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll just kind of go around and talk with each member of your team.
Well, oddly enough, I learned about H2O for Life from a heckler in an audience when I went to learn about a different water program where they were asking high school children to, by school, to raise $15,000 to purchase a deep bore pump. And there was a woman in the audience named Patty Hall, who is the co-founder of H2O for Life. And she said, there's a better way. We can do this cheaper and more efficiently. And I had students with me. This was at the National Service Learning Conference when it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we had never even heard of a global water crisis in 2007. And, but we were so inspired by the concept and so affected by the severity of the situation. Already it snuck up on us, and we determined that that would not happen again and that we had the power to change things. So we got to work immediately and selected a school through H2O for Life that we could partner with and help them with water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's wonderful what you're doing, and to involve students at this age. It's very critical that they learn about this problem, because most Americans, most people in North America don't realize we truly have a water crisis until something happens. But people around the globe, over almost 1.5 billion people a day, very much live with this issue. So Abby, why do you think that there's a water crisis around the globe, and what really motivated you to get involved?
Well, as a club, a large part of what we do is education. So in order to educate people, we need to be informed as well. So we do a ton of research, and the facts show that there is a global water crisis. A child dies every 20 seconds because of lack of water or poor sanitation. So we really know the facts, and we know that the water crisis exists. But besides that, members of our club, including myself, have traveled to developing nations. I've traveled to Nicaragua twice, and Mrs. Rogers behind me has gone to Kenya, and we've also had members go to Rwanda. So we've been able to see firsthand the effects of not having water has on people and children, and they're not allowed to get an education because they don't have water, and it's just a very significant issue.
I think it's absolutely fantastic, and at your age in high school, you have people traveling in all these different countries. You're seeing what life is really like abroad, and you're bringing back that knowledge, and that's very, very important to have back in the United States, because how things are abroad certainly is very different than how we see it in the United States and Canada, which is part of NAFTA. Joe, how does H2O for Life get involved on a global basis?
Well, we partner with schools all around the world. There's almost 200 pairs of schools all across this country that pair with schools in developing nations to help them with hygiene and water issues, sanitation. It's just a really important issue that we feel we can help with. And we help, we often provide things like rain catchment systems or latrines for schools who only have, one bathroom to share among 200 kids. And we feel it's just really important to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity.
Yeah, many of the schools, I should say, in some countries, most of the schools do not have access to any kind of really clean water. In some cases, no water whatsoever, except what they can carry themselves from their homes. And so that really is a dire situation. Noelle, thank you for being the bringer of Skype to the world, and have you come in from Pennsylvania. Well, what do you think the typical person can do that help to create best practices that can work through H2O for Life, just like yours, but also other clubs and organizations in the community that really can get involved in this type of project?
Well, the best practices in this sort of situation can be as simple as conserving water in your own home. Things like taking shorter showers and turning off the sink when you brush your teeth. But more important than that is the education. Learning about the crisis is so necessary, because without the education bit of it, then we can't expect to understand the problem and get to fundraising to help the people in developing countries that need the water. So a big part of what H2O does is educate in schools around our area. We've been to colleges in the area, and at Washington, D.C., that was part of what we were doing, so that we can have people to help us fundraise.
Well, fundraising is critical to all this, and we're going to have some photographs of that if we can bring up some of the slides from here. But Mary, I have Hal sitting right beside me. He and I have known each other for many years through Rotary, and I'm going to let him ask you the next question. So he's involved with us, and he is a true expert in water and, as you know, working on the project in India. Hal?
You want this question?
Life. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is the work of the H2O for Life Club done by you or by your students?
It's a partnership. There are about somewhere between 60 and 80 students just in my school alone who work literally every day on some aspect of bringing water knowledge or raising money. We work together. It's I'm sort of the office assistant to H2O for Life, but as you said yourself, Noelle put this whole thing together for us this afternoon. Abby takes care of all of our correspondence and communication with people all over the world, and Joe is one of our decision makers. He leads all kinds of kids. We have different teams. So we have board meetings in my office a couple times a month. And we work together. It's truly a partnership, and none of us we're not islands. In fact, our theme, which you probably can't see on the t-shirts, says we are the solution. And we really believe we're a team effort, and that we are the solution to the global water shortage, and also the lack of knowledge that surrounds this issue in developing countries.
Well, meeting you on Capitol Hill and seeing how you interacted with all the students you brought from Abington High School and the Abington school system I know you're more than the office assistant to all these folks, but we understand you're downplaying your role, and the students you have are really very much engaged, and students, we really do appreciate it. Abby, looking at, why do you think the average American should get involved and be engaged about taking whatever step they want to do to bring water to these almost 1.5 billion people around the globe, and 3.5 billion that do not have access to any type of sanitation?
Well, the thing is, there are over 7 billion people in the world, and we were just talking about how the population might rise to 9 billion. And we're all sharing the same supply of water, the same supply of water that's been around since the dinosaurs walked on the earth. And it's our job as human beings to keep this water clean and to make sure it's safe and easily accessible to everybody. And as Americans, we are fortunate enough to have the technology to keep this water clean and to make it easily accessible. So we should. And by making it accessible to the people that don't have clean water and access to clean water, we can bring them education, we can make sure they have healthier lives. And that's a really powerful thing that we're able to do, and we should as human beings.
Well, Joe, I'm going to ask you this. Be quick, because I'm going to give Mary the last word if we can. I guess we need to go to Noel, too. H2O for Life, how does it accomplish its goals? Be quick, about 30 seconds.
We have a couple of events, mainly a big concert we call Soundwave, where we try and raise money, and every dollar we make is matched by WASH advocates or a UN agency, and it's donated to people who need the money for water issues.
Noel, looking at your club, how are you helping in general the environmental community through H2O for Life? 30 seconds again.
Aside from education, an important part of what we do is we go into the community and we have projects like the rain barrels pictured, where you can take water from your roof and save it and use it in your garden, or riparian buffers, which we have made in the past in our community, which reduce the amount of litter and rain flow that goes straight into the water system.
Mary, you have the last word. What is next for H2O for Life as far as your club there and working with your other schools around the globe?
Well, it's very exciting. We just got a really nice grant to help us for next year. And our students are going to have another school. We hope to have 200 students. And we'll have a high school something.
Yeah, we're going to lose Mary. Sorry about that. We got you on too late. But thank you for being with us as we see this exciting organization, H2O for Life, that's making a difference in schools around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them. Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
my son,
my sister-in-law
were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can. Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember
what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America. Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, An up-to-date vaccination called the TD Booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD Booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States, looking around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for the best practices and technologies, products, and solutions that are making a difference as we go towards 2050. Why 2050? That's the middle of the century, and at the same time, it's one of those critical points where either we'll be able to take care of the severe climate change, or we'll be just absolutely running out of the resources for 2 billion new people are going to be joining us on the planet. But at Emerald Planet, we believe through the technologies, services, products, and the people, we will be making a difference as we move forward. We have a gentleman who is working very actively in the country of Bolivia and Latin America. His name is Stanley Reisholt Chavez. He is the water coordinator through the Foundation of Conservation Chiquinano Forest, and he's also the water program coordinator for what's called Safe Water in Eastern Bolivia. And Stan, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. You're a long way from home.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being in Washington, D.C., and our good friend Nellie, who introduced us to each other. She is absolutely a fantastic individual.
She is.
And we know each other through Rotary International, and you're a Rotarian, as we see by your pin on your collar there. But tell us a little bit about your foundation. What is it, and why it exists?
Well, the Foundation for the Conservation of the Chiquitano Forest is actually a forest region in eastern Bolivia, and it comprises about 20 million hectares. And it's a transition forest between the rainforest and the Chaco region, which is like a desert area, and you have the Pantanal, which is like wetlands. And so then it's a very fragile, dry tropical forest.
Well, I tell you, it's really interesting. I was looking at the map and doing some research about your area. You have the savannas, you have almost a desert type, and then you also have, in a sense, a rainforest. So you really have many different climatic zones all within one very large geographical location in eastern Bolivia.
Yeah, yeah.
And so looking at that, what are some of the key differences as far as water, because that's our topic, between clean, safe, and potable water? And we know there is a difference.
Yeah.
And please explain it to us.
Well, what we focus on is, for us, clean water can be a water that you see in a stream or a river, transparent, fish swim it but when you drink it, you can actually have a loose stomach, you know. And for us, safe water actually has six parameters that are measured that assure that it's a water that's safe to drink. And that should be measured 4 times a year. And potable water is actually a water that's usually treated by a water treatment process, and it has up to 26 parameters that are measured continuously, depending on the scale. If it's a big city, then it's daily, and if it's a town, it can be done weekly. And you go down to a village, and it's done maybe once a month.
Yeah, I think this whole thing about this difference between the clean, safe, and potable water, and then we realize that almost maybe 20% of the world's population doesn't have any of these three. It's just dirty water.
Yeah.
And when you travel abroad and go to different countries, you see really just how dirty some of this water is. What are some of the challenges that your program in the Chiquitano Forest in providing safe water in these rural areas, because that really is the standard for many of these rural localities?
Yeah, in the beginning we were involved with helping with the drilling of water wells and providing the hand pumps that are put into these wells. But eventually what we transitioned into was to start looking at preventive maintenance and repair of those pumps, because about 60% of hand pumps are broken. And so the regional municipalities actually do corrective maintenance. They wait until the pump breaks. And we all know that pumps need maintenance. And so we've been working with the regional government of the Department of Santa Cruz and each municipality to teach them about preventive maintenance and repair.
Now, looking at these photographs here, now this is water that certainly I don't think comes under any of the categories as far as the clean, safe, or potable, but this really, I think, Stan, would be very typical of what you see in water in many areas of the world, and we're going to move right in where you have people trying to come out of a deep well. So what are they faced with as far as the quality of water, even in this type of situation where it's a dug well? But again, sanitation is a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we are focused now is in a 4-step process. What we're looking for is to start working in what I consider hygiene transformation. And that's teaching villagers using a microscope to see the bugs that are in the water so they can understand why we're insisting on improving their living conditions and providing safe water and getting them to wash their hands.
Well, one of these things, as far as just soap, regardless of the quality of the water, really, they say it's almost 95% will take care of most of the bacteria and the bad things as far as the water is concerned. So going back to this photograph here, we're showing men actually, I believe, trying to drill a well. Tell us about this process. How do you select an area where you actually want to put a well, and what is involved in that?
Well, the selection of drilling a well is done by the regional government that has the drilling equipment that was donated by the Japanese cooperation. And in that area, they're searching for where there's fractured rock formations, and they do 3D studies to determine exactly where they can drill. And once they do drill the borehole and they have the well, you put on these hand pumps. And these hand pumps are actually the India Mark II pump that actually originated from India. And they're what you called bush pump. Yeah. And they're extremely resilient. So we go in and make sure that they're installed properly in the beginning. And if we repair them and make sure that they're functioning.
Well, looking at this photograph here, I know these are people from one of the local communities that you're dealing with to provide the safe water. What are you doing as far as the after installation so that these pumps are maintained on a regular basis and they don't fail and have to go through that process, but allow the people to continue to have water, but also have scheduled maintenance at the same time?
Yeah, we have a team of a technician that goes out in a pickup truck and actually incorporates the municipal technician. And he goes out with the parts on the vehicle and gets the pump maintained and repaired in a few hours. And he's actually training the pump technicians of the municipality on how to make the diagnostics and repair them.
Well, I think this is something really important. We see here one of the schedules that you have as far as maintaining the pumps and when it's serviced and all that. In these special, what we sometimes call bush pumps, how many movable parts are there, and what is involved in actually maintaining this? Are there any lubricants, or it's bushings, or just what goes involved in that, Stan?
Well, it depends. Usually you have somewhere around under 30 moving parts that are actually can be replaced. And most of the errors that we find is the use of a galvanized pipe or mild steel rods. So we would go in and replace those rods and those pipes. And And then the cylinder of the pump is actually has to be in the right depth, and so we make sure that the parts inside the cylinder are functioning, and we replace the rubber parts and things that are in the cylinder.
So looking at the scheduled maintenance on this, Stan, how often would you have your technicians go out and work with the local technicians that are living in the communities so they continually keep the pumps up to a certain standard, but also to make sure that any wearable equipment or gaskets or what have you are replaced on a regular basis and keeps it functioning for the community?
Well, we normally go back and once a year, and the ideal situation would be to do it twice a year. Unfortunately, due to costs, because you're traveling 200 kilometers and stuff, that you can only get there once a year.
Well, looking at this map, this is really a huge area that you're doing a lot of work in and serving these communities. So where is the source of support? And I know that there's a number of collaborators that you're working with on this particular project. So who are these collaborators and how do you involve them?
Well, we've been working very closely with Rotary and several Rotary districts and Rotary clubs in Bolivia and in outside of Bolivia, and they support the water program with short-term grants. And we've been involved with the Canadian Water Foundation. It's actually Canadian Rotary Water Foundation. And we've been collaborating with many organizations. One that's very important is Engineers in Action. It's an NGO that's in Oklahoma and has offices in Bolivia.
Well, I wanted to jump in here. We're almost out of time, Stan, but I know you have a couple other technologies. You have this very efficient cooking stove so that you're reducing the amount of trees that are being cut to protect the watershed. This Adobe stove that you're putting in, and then also getting to the sanitation aspects. These, I will assume, these are probably dry pit latrines that you're using. So what's the importance of both of these? And we only have about 30 seconds to cover all that.
Well, the Malena stoves is actually, we work with a German cooperation called GIZ, and they've built about 50,000 of these Adobe stoves.
And then the pit latrine?
And the pit latrine is, we're working on what we call the ventilated improved pit latrine, a VIP latrine. And that's one of our next steps.
Well, I tell you, this is a phenomenal work that you're doing there in Bolivia. This is Stan Chavez, who is the coordinator with the Safe Water Program in Eastern Bolivia, and also putting in the small, very efficient stoves and also the pit latrines as we look around the globe to create Emerald Planet.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me.
There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States. I'm the President, Executive Director of the organization. This is our 40th anniversary as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for the 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking at the issue of water. There's going to be 2 billion new people on the planet by 2050. And so in a time when we're actually already stretched on this globe as far as having water, which is the potable water is about 1% of the total water volume that's on the earth, how are we going to be able to accommodate 2 billion new people and provide the standard and quality of living that's so very important, not to exist, but to actually live. So we have a firm that we identified that we met about a year ago from Australia, and this is Robert Damanco, who is the director and founder of what's called Sure Agua Portable Water Corporation out in Australia. And we're still trying to get Robert and his group on Skype, and I have Stan Ronshold Chavez, who is the water coordinator for the Safe Water Project in Bolivia. And so we're going to bring up some of the photographs that Robert Damanco, because it's an absolutely fantastic technology they have. But Stan and I are going to continue to chat right along about water and about Bolivia. So, and then we're going to keep trying to get Robert and his team on Skype as this is going on, but we'll use, Stan, if you don't mind, some of the photographs that was shared with us. But looking at the water here, you see these two gentlemen. One is a sportsman out in the countryside. Another is a military officer. Looking at this water, how does this relate to what's in East Bolivia and Eastern Bolivia and other places around the globe, and the need for very simple, inexpensive technologies to provide safe drinking water?
Well, that technology right there is the Life Straw, and it actually complements what are the water wells. And water wells is something that it's a well that brings water close to their homes, but many times villagers have to go and work their crops, and that's far away, and so they end up drinking contaminated water. And so
they just continue the infection that they're getting, whether it's some kind of bacteria or worms or what have you,
yes,
in the stomach, and or they somehow contract dengue fever or yellow fever or one of these.
Yeah, so they get thirsty, and definitely when you're thirsty, you just don't have a choice, and you start drinking whatever water is available. So the Life Straw actually is a lifesaver, because it's potable and it goes in the back pocket, or it hangs right there, and so they have a very quick and easy solution to be able to catch a drink of water.
Well, looking at this is the jerry can. Looks like something you'd have on the old Willys Jeep or something that was used in World War II or out in the bush. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I know part of it was developed for conflict areas where you have villagers actually fleeing their areas and they didn't have time to take anything with them. But this will allow them to grab something that's equivalent to about 3 gallons of water, about 12 liters approximately, and they can do that on the fly. So looking at the people in your area and eastern Bolivia, what are they faced with on a day-to-day basis as far as water is concerned? And the project that you have, your Safe Water project through the foundation, how are you really addressing the needs of people that live across a very expansive geographical area?
Oh, absolutely. You see many villagers that are living in very, very remote places, and they have to walk many times a kilometer, 2 kilometers to get some water. And actually 1 liter of water is equivalent to 1 kilo, which is 2.2 pounds. And so the farther you are, the less water you can carry. And they actually some go and carry contaminated water, trying to bring it back to their homes. So safe water through wells and life straws and other technologies like sodas and these type of cans actually brings the water closer to them. And it just improves their lives considerably.
Well, looking at this whole thing as far as what is really needed and looking at the various ways of what we call, and the Power for Peace is the program we have through Emerald Planet, is toteable, portable, and inexpensive. And those are all critical, and I think even just like the pump project that you have in eastern Bolivia, you're trying to do a similar type of thing. How do the local people in the villages and the small towns, communities, get involved to help to underwrite and support their own water, so it's not just international money or a foundation that's providing it, and how do they become very much hands-on in this process?
Well, it's 2 levels. One is when you're working with subsistent level villagers. They're very poor, extremely poor. So then they contribute a lot with their own work and their own labor. So we always go into the village, and they're the ones that set the priorities, and we try to encourage them to follow and go into preventive maintenance. So they help and they assist in every process that we do in repairing those pumps. And as the village grows and their economy grows, they can eventually start maintaining their own pumps. And they usually transition to a submersible pump with a generator, or they have electricity, which is one of the priorities of the regional government of Bolivia there, is to have electricity in all the villages.
So this is something that actually is a broad national policy as far as development for the entire country, and at the same time protecting the health, safety, and welfare of all the citizens. And looking at some of this very simple technology, I know we talked about, the straw, the water straw, and the jerry can. Many of the countries, people are now buying, bottled water, which is, it's really anathema in many ways. One, they have to have safe water, but at the same time, some of these countries, there's just hundreds of millions of these water bottles that are all over the countryside.
Absolutely.
And so you're adding to the importation of fossil fuels. You have all this litter everywhere. Some of it does get recycled. So how can we go through, Stan, and avoid the use of bottled water and make sure that people feel comfortable in using the water they have in their own community?
Well, actually, what is an interesting technology, they call it SODIS, is they get the 2-liter bottle of a Coke or anything that's a transparent bottle, and they wash it out, and they put contaminated water into it, and they set it on the roof, and through UV rays, they sterilize the water. So they're, in a sense, recycling these used Coke bottles and that type of stuff.
Now, looking at use of the bottles that way, as far as the old soda or soft drink bottles, one, do you filter the water? And secondly, how long do you leave it in the sun in order to be able to sterilize the water so that you kill all the bacteria and the microbes that may be in there that's really harmful for human health?
Usually you're looking for a 24-hour period where you're getting at least 10 hours of sunlight on that bottle. And then that kills all the bacteria that's alive inside that water. And it's a very simple technology. and it's gaining a lot of popularity. And like I say, that complements the other types of water treatment systems.
So in other words, if someone has the time, they can put these bottles out, 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever it is, have it sterilized, and then as they leave for the fields or they're heading to the bus to go into the major city for their job, they can actually take this water with them, but it's sterilized, and then they can replenish it with the next set of bottles that are sterilizing the water, again, using the sun as their source of energy.
Yeah, it's very simple technology, but it works when you're out in the field, that's for sure.
Looking at this backpack, I know this is very popular among campers, hunters, many other people using this. Are these relatively expensive for the communities that you're serving? And is something like this, a viable alternative in this, or is this more in the area of more affluent communities and those that are really sports enthusiasts and hunters and other type of people that are going out but coming back in a short period of time?
Well, we've seen this more with bikers and people that do long bike rides, and I haven't seen them in the villages at all. But it could be something interesting to look at.
So it may be something that could possibly be useful. And this is something that I think you see a lot of these types of products all over the place. I've even seen these in countries in Africa and other places where I live. But what do you see for the future of water as we move towards 2050? And we're adding 2 billion more people, and of course Latin America is increasing its population all the time.
Well, one of the important things is if you work with the villagers that are in the rural area and you improve their living conditions, they remain there and they become the stewards of the forest. And if you go in with a second layer and a third layer of development, you can actually start looking at conservation of their water sources at a village level. And that actually begins to influence the larger cities and the larger towns. And so we look at from outside in.
Instead of looking at the cities as the purveyor of all knowledge, you're actually using your rural communities to try to influence the larger cities and main towns throughout Bolivia.
Yeah, that's one of our goals, is to do that and make it more sustainable.
Well, it's fantastic to have you with us on the Emerald Planet, and we're going to have credits rolling here. And Stan, it's just absolutely wonderful what you're doing in Bolivia, and thank you for sharing the photographs, but also to bring such a wealth of wisdom that you've shared with us about the different types of water and how to address water issues in these local communities. And we just think it's fantastic what you're doing. Much thanks to Nellie for. Thank you very much for being